So to get started, could you give us your full name, the position you're applying for, the number of years in your present position, and what seat you are seeking?
Yes, and just want to thank you also for extending an invitation for me to be here. But I'm Dr. Patrice Centino. I am running for Orleans Parish School Board District 1. Currently, I am the owner and CEO of Center for Hope Children and Family Services. I have been in that position for 13 years. Also an assistant professor at Southern University at New Orleans in the School of Social Work. I've been in that position for 3 years. However, I've been servicing children and families for over 25 years.
Oh, okay, great. I also want to introduce Brandon Gilmore. He's going to be one of our moderators, so he'll come in a few minutes. All right, so I do have a few questions I'd like to ask you. So what is your background and experience dealing specifically with education?
Yes, like I said, I am a university professor. I have been at Southern University at New Orleans for 3 years. I have also been an adjunct lecturer at University of Southern California, as well as Columbia University in their School of Social Work department. Center for Hope is an outpatient behavioral health agency that serves families and children and adolescents in the community. So I have worked closely with Orleans Parish school systems after Hurricane Katrina to provide trauma-informed care, training to students and families, trainings on trauma-informed practices to educators, as well as representing children as far as it relates to 504 accommodations, advocating for special needs of some of my clients. And so I continue that work today at Center for Hope. So I continue to be engaged with the community, students, families, in making sure needs are met. I've worked at Orleans Parish Juvenile Court, where I definitely saw under-resourced youth become casualties of the school of pipeline. So I worked as the director of the Families in Need of FINS program to reform a system of punishment into a rehabilitative one. And so with FINS, we work closely with truancy, the schools, as well as the courts.
Okay, great. So in seeking this position, you do have a lot of qualifications, that would definitely apply to it. And this is a question we want to ask. Have you ever been disciplined, arrested, convicted of a crime, or convicted of a crime?
No, I have not.
Okay. And how are you going to better manage the charter school boards?
I think if we're talking about better management, we definitely need to make sure that we are actively engaged. And of course, we know that Orleans Parish School Board is responsible for the collective oversight and performance of charter schools and the performance and educational outcomes that they are met for all of our students. And so this will definitely require the development of a comprehensive, systematic, and ongoing approach to identify the needs, the resources, and to assess school practices with charter management organizations. And so board members must aggressively target those challenges that plague low-performing schools, as well as providing additional resources to our students to support those needs so that they can overcome the challenges that they face. And so we also, as board members, definitely must bring together all stakeholders in developing a strategic plan that is supported by the charter schools, the community, parents, and teachers.
Great. Okay, one of the major problems with the charter schools is the One App program. How do you plan to address this problem?
Yes. When we talk about One App, I definitely would like to look at policies and procedures to make sure that there are no embedded discriminatory practices in the One App process. And so if we're talking about the One app, we definitely need to look at practices and procedures, making sure that parents are informed of the quality schools choices that they have, how schools are selected for their potential, for their children, and explaining that process to them, as well as, because the One app, although the One app may act as a centralized single point of entry for students, but it does not guarantee equity for all students. So we definitely need to look at things through an equity lens to make sure students are provided, regardless of what school they get disseminated to, that they still have the opportunity for a high quality, high performing school. And so definitely looking at policies and practices that govern the One app, because One app, like I said, it doesn't guarantee equity. And so when students don't get their first, second, and third choice, it's no longer choice, but chance. And so we need a better way to ensure that children and families can be like siblings. Their sibling priority, that they can be in the same schools, as well as neighborhood schools, making sure we have adequate neighborhood schools so that children won't have to be bused from one town to the other side of town and passing up D schools in their district to go to another D school across town. So I definitely would like to look at that process. And I truly believe in community involvement. And so we need to get the people involved that are most affected by this. So that looks like parents, that looks like students. They need to be at the table when making these decisions.
And I agree, because to me, it's a challenge when your child goes to school across town and they have PTA meetings. Some parents, cannot get transportation, to get to the school. So it's hard for them to actually just participate, with school activities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Gilmore. He has a few more questions.
Okay.
Brandon?
Thank you, Ms. Dawn. Now, Ms. Santino, how do you view Orleans Parish School Board implementing coronavirus plan for our children to return to school, and do you agree with it?
I was pleased early on when the decision was made to bring in-person back learning in after Labor Day, as well as extending it now to 5th through 12th grade after mid-October. So I was pleased that they made that decision. However, I think we need to make sure that we look at plans, we look at processes, and bring students back with minimum risk. And that looks like even the school board needs to have a plan, and they need to be able to hold charter management organizations and schools accountable to make sure that they are utilizing state public health measures as it relates to COVID-19, such as masks, social distancing, decontamination, making sure school buses, the transportation is following guidelines and regulations to assist with minimizing the risk of COVID-19 and the spread of COVID-19. And so my concern is to make sure that we are doing what we need to do as far as monitoring and accountability, because it's very challenging, because it's not a unified rollout plan. So we have individual organizations, and so we have individual organizations have pretty much their basic plan that they're guiding by. But I do think we need to make sure that we are led by data and continue to monitor the data and science as we go forward with making decisions. And I think it's important that we make sure that we are looking at children through an emotional perspective lens, because a lot of families have faced death, trauma, and so we really need to be able to meet the needs of our students through a social and emotional lens.
Thank you. My next question is, if you had a choice of charter versus traditional schools, which one would you prefer and why?
If I was to have a choice, I think if we were to look at the system in which we have now, traditional and charter, because our charters are all public schools. And so the system in which it is now is not much different from traditional education. And so I think I would choose according to what my needs were, resources in those schools, what schools are high performing, as well as meeting the needs of siblings, making sure staying connected in the community, neighborhood schools. So I think I would look at many different factors. And so it's hard to say would I choose traditional or charter, because right now we have a whole district that public schools, but has being run by charter management organizations. And so right now, if we look at data pre-Katrina to where we are now, has not been much change as it relates to moving schools forward, as it relates to performance measures and outcomes and resources for our students.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is, we have witnessed children younger than 10 years old standing at school bus stops in the dark between 6 and 7 a.m. and also being returned back to this location after 5 p.m. when it's dark again. This is an issue for children. What plans, if any, do you intend to increase neighborhood schools where our children can attend school in their neighborhood?
Yeah, that is a first and foremost priority. I think we need to definitely look at how do we put more neighborhood schools and the resources in those schools. Looking at the transportation policy. Of course, the transportation policy has been altered or changed to where students can't be picked up before a certain time. But we definitely know that we still have students that are on the bus, sometimes no less going and coming 4 hours a day on the school bus. And so we'll look at policies, practices, input from parents, input from students as we move forward. And I think I mentioned this earlier. One of the biggest problems is equity. And so equity, we definitely need to look at things through an equity lens and how transportation and neighborhood schools affect disadvantaged students and vulnerable students living in certain areas. And so I think we need to make sure that a comprehensive assessment is done of that issue with transportation and neighborhood schools.
Thank you. My next question is, do you agree that each charter school should manage their own bus contract?
I think we need to have a unified plan in place. Okay, and so if we look at charter management organizations and the school board oversight, I think the autonomy that's given to charter schools comes with expectations of high performance and is defined by the charter accountability framework. And so Orleans Parish School Board is responsible for the collective performance of those schools and must ensure that educational milestones are met. And so it is the school board's responsibility ultimately to make sure we're providing and promoting successful learning for all of our students. And so, like I said, ongoing reviewing of policies and procedures, but one thing that was positive about the school board pre-Katrina was that it was unified. And so right now we don't have unification across the board. And so when you have a district and all of those schools fall under a district, it gets very complex because you have different managers, leaders that's rolling out different curricula, different pedagogical teaching methods, The bus, a unit, we just got to a point where they have agreed next year to get on a unified schedule. And so we haven't seen it yet, but it's going to be interesting to see how that works, because not all the schools have agreed to do that. So I believe in unification.
Okay, thank you. My last question is, specifically, what have you done in the last year as a contribution to the city efforts for the investment of your community?
In the last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, in the last year, like I said, being an educator, a mental health provider, community provider, as well as a practitioner, I have trained and educated students in the field of social work, school social workers, working in different disciplines in social work. I sit on various different community boards, such as National Coalition of 100 Black Women. I mentor high school young ladies. Also sit on Independent Women's Organization board, as well as League of Women Voters. So I'm very involved as it relates to policy changes, policy advocacy, and that's continuous. And that has been for, like I said, 25 years. One of the biggest things that I'm definitely proud of is Center for Hope, Children and Family Services, which was birthed out of Hurricane Katrina. I saw a lot of children being mischaracterized as having deviant or oppositional behaviors when they were actually suffering with trauma. And so I opened Center for Hope when there was no services in New Orleans East, behavioral or mental health services. And so I continue to do the work of working with schools daily, working with children and families daily, and also being a researcher. I have several published articles that has been published, and continue to do the work to understand to understand the ongoing trends in education.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. I have a question. Do you think the school system is doing enough to work with the special needs children that are in the city?
Right. And no, I don't. I don't think we're doing everything we can to meet the needs of our special needs students. And so whether it's look like providing resources for those students, and so I think we definitely need to make sure that we implement approaches that will address the needs of our special needs students. And of course, we know that we've experienced the mass push out of the lack of services of students who either cost too much to educate because of special needs or disabilities, or because they are not likely to boost the school performance scores. So while some progress has been made with the implementation of a differentiated funding formula, however, all students must receive the proper evaluation and services to address their special needs, regardless of the school that they attend. And this may require some centralized support to ensure that the resources are available and the best practices are utilized. And so we must recognize factors such as social emotional conditions and the mental health issues that may negatively affect student performance, and obtain funding to address those needs. And so we've heard about it in the news, we've read articles how schools are not meeting the needs of our special needs students, students with 504 accommodations. And so we definitely, if elected, I definitely would like to look at those policies in practice to make sure no one is left out, because I believe in inclusivity and providing services for every child.
Dr. Santino, we want to thank you so much for participating in our forum, and good luck. Oh, one other thing, what is your number on the ballot?
My number is 119.
119. Okay, thank you so much and good night.